I have this picture of looking down at a neighborhood of about 100 houses. Catastrophic events takes down the power grid. But a few seconds later, you see the lights flickering back in half a dozen houses. Those houses are arks. Each one of these families is fathered by a man who has prepared to make his home self-sufficient in times of chaos, to protect his family and to bless his community. Ark building is not a command that we must follow, but Paul describes it as a goal each of us ought to have. He lists some goals in 1 Thessalonians 4, 11 and 12. Make it your goal. And the final one is, quote, that you will not need to depend on others. This goal of physical self-sufficiency is not for the purpose of being isolated, but he makes clear it's to allow us to be maximally generous. By the way, that word self-sufficiency, when I wrote this essay originally, people were kind of pushing back. Hey, shouldn't we just call this financial independence? One of the problems is we don't actually have a really good word for this. Self-sufficiency, it sounds like not exactly biblical. And I understand, like we're always needing to be dependent on God, dependent on his body, dependent on one another. That interdependence is better. But if you just say financial independence, that doesn't actually talk about things like electricity independence, water independence, food independence. And really what Paul is describing here is all of those things, right? So you will not have to be dependent on anyone. So I apologize for using the word self-sufficiency. I don't like that phrase, but I don't think there's really a great phrase. If you guys have one or can think of one, please share it with me. But that's kind of the one that most clearly describes what I think we're talking about here. All right. So the family who is struggling to survive through continual financial dependence will be unable to be maximally generous with those in need. So building an ark begins by simply making it a long-term goal. Our family has a series of steps toward preparing our ark. And here are the steps. Number one, you start by creating an emergency fund of 2 to 3 months of living expenses. So Dave Ramsey talked about that. Make sure that you're not just living paycheck to paycheck. So once you have that, number two, have a month's worth of emergency food in the house. So the food supply in most places is about a 3-day supply before it completely runs out. And so you don't want to be in that much dependence on the food supply in your area if something were to happen. Number three, get out of any debt not secured by assets. So one of the things that any kind of debt that's unsecured debt, like credit cards or whatever, those things are oftentimes things that are going to kind of take the arc down. So we want to be careful of those things. 4, stop living paycheck to paycheck by making most of our money through cash flowing assets. So part of what we want to be moving towards is to have a way of making income from the assets themselves. When your money makes money, that creates a lot more stability for a family. 5, have a secondary heat source for the house. So like a wood burning stove, or like what would you do in a winter? And of course, if you live in a hot area, that's not a big deal, but many of us live in places where this could be a serious issue. Number 6, install a secondary electricity source. And this is one of the things that I love that technology is improving, that this is becoming easier and easier to do. So generators, full house batteries, obviously using things like solar. So the combination between like finding another electricity source like solar and then storing it in batteries, like whole house batteries, is something that is getting cheaper and more popular in areas. So, and then I would say number 7, install a secondary water source. So one of the things that we did was we put a 3,000 gallon cistern that is fed by our gutters. So you don't have to be totally dependent on city water, even if you live in a city. Number 8, have a means of food production that is under your control. So this could be like having chickens, having a garden, canning. Well, one of the things we got really into is indoor micro farming, which we can get into. But we got a whole setup for that. You can basically grow about 10 pounds of produce a week against one wall of your house. It's crazy. So we live in a great day and age to create turn a house into an ark. And again, this is a fun project. So last thing, our family hasn't felt led to go full homestead. For ministry reasons, we live in a central location in our city, and our street adjoins an urban area. So we've had to get creative about how to move our family toward increasing physical self-sufficiency. As a father, I love going to bed at night knowing that my family is sleeping in a kind of ark that can withstand some tough storms and rocky times ahead. We don't live in fear. We seek first the kingdom of God, and we follow Paul's command to move towards a lifestyle of self-sufficiency plus generosity. And again, I know that word is kind of weird for some people, but you guys hear my heart when I'm saying